The gavel came down like a death sentence. Full custody awarded to the mother, Violet Chun. Supervised visitation only for the father. I watched my 7-year-old daughter Morgan's face crumble as she realized what just happened. The man in the black robe, Judge Dominic Walsh, had just ripped my heart out and handed it to the woman who destroyed our family. But what made my blood freeze wasn't losing custody. It was seeing Morgan mouth the words, "I'm sorry, Daddy," while tears streamed down her face. My own daughter had just lied under oath, and someone had coached her to do it. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. 3 months earlier, I thought I had the perfect life. Adrian Blackwood, successful tech company owner, loving father, devoted husband, or so I believed. My world shattered the night I came home early from a business trip and found Violet in our bed with Blake Morrison, the city's most ruthless real estate mogul. The sound of their laughter still haunts me. They weren't just having an affair, they were laughing about how stupid I was, how easy it would be to take everything I'd worked for. He'll never see it coming, Violet had whispered between kisses. Blake, you promised me we'd get the house, the business, everything. Especially Morgan. I stood frozen in the hallway, recording every word on my phone. My wife of 10 years, the mother of my child, was planning to destroy me. But hearing Blake's response made my hands shake with rage. Don't worry, baby. Judge Walsh owes me big time. Those charity donations I've been making to his foundation, let's just say they guarantee certain outcomes. Your husband won't know what hit him. That night, I moved into a hotel. The divorce papers were filed within a week. But Violet struck first, claiming I was abusive, unstable, a danger to Morgan. Lies. All lies. But in family court, lies spoken by a crying mother carry more weight than truth spoken by a desperate father. The custody battle lasted 2 months. Every hearing felt rigged. Judge Walsh would cut me off mid-sentence, but let Violet ramble for hours about my supposed anger issues. My lawyer, Felix Rodriguez, one of the best in the state, couldn't understand why we kept losing every motion. Adrian, something's not right here. Felix had warned me after our 3rd failed attempt at joint custody. Walsh is acting like he's already made up his mind. This isn't justice. This is theater. But nothing prepared me for today's final hearing. Watching my daughter take the stand, seeing her small hands tremble as she repeated words that weren't hers. Daddy yells a lot. He scares me sometimes. I want to live with Mommy. Every word was a knife in my chest because I knew the truth. Morgan and I had always been best friends. We built blanket forts, had pancake breakfasts every Sunday, read bedtime stories where she'd act out all the characters. She called me her best daddy in the whole universe. The child on that stand wasn't my Morgan. She was a broken little girl who'd been programmed to betray the person who loved her most. As the courtroom emptied, I caught sight of Blake Morrison in the gallery, smirking like he'd just won the lottery. Violet avoided my eyes, but I saw something there. Guilt, maybe even fear. But it was too late. The damage was done. Outside the courthouse, Felix grabbed my arm. This isn't over, Adrian. Something stinks about this whole case. Walsh barely looked at the evidence we presented, your financial records, character witnesses, even that recording of Violet's affair. It's like he'd already written his decision before we walked in. That's when it hit me. The recording. The one where Violet and Blake discussed bribing Judge Walsh. In my grief over losing Morgan, I'd forgotten about the smoking gun sitting in my phone. But as I reached for it, my blood turned to ice. The recording was gone. Deleted. Someone had accessed my phone and erased the only evidence that could have saved my daughter. I looked up at the courthouse windows and saw a figure watching me from the 5th floor, Judge Walsh himself. He raised his coffee mug in what looked like a mock toast, then disappeared behind the blinds. That's when I realized this wasn't just about custody. This was war. And they'd fired the first shot by turning my own daughter into a weapon against me. But Blake Morrison made one crucial mistake. He assumed I'd roll over and accept defeat like his other victims. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I built my tech company from nothing, survived corporate espionage, and outmaneuvered competitors who tried to destroy me. I didn't become successful by giving up when things got tough. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop fighting or things get worse for Morgan. This is your only warning. A friend. I stared at that message and felt something cold settle in my chest. They thought threatening my daughter would make me back down. Instead, it just made me dangerous. Because what Blake Morrison didn't know was that I'd spent years documenting every dirty deal, every bribed official, every skeleton in this city's closet through my company's security contracts. I had files on half the judges in this district, including photos of Walsh at Blake's private parties where envelopes full of cash changed hands. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. But they just declared war on a man who had nothing left to lose except his daughter, and I'd burn this entire corrupt system to the ground before I let them keep her. The real game was just beginning. The deleted recording haunted me for 3 sleepless days. Someone had accessed my phone, wiped my evidence, and left me defenseless. But they made one mistake. They underestimated how desperate a father becomes when his child is stolen from him. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to destroy everyone who touched my daughter's life. Hunter Steele answered on the first ring. We'd served together in the Army 15 years ago, and now he ran the most discreet private investigation firm in the state. If anyone could dig up dirt on Blake Morrison, it was Hunter. Adrian. Christ, man, I heard about the custody thing. I'm sorry. His voice carried that familiar edge that meant he was already thinking like a soldier. What do you need? Everything on Blake Morrison. Financial records, business dealings, personal life. I want to know what he eats for breakfast and who he's bribing for lunch. I paced my empty apartment, the silence where Morgan's laughter used to be driving me insane. This is about more than custody, isn't it? Blake Morrison destroyed my family as a business transaction. Now I'm returning the favor. Hunter was quiet for a moment. I'll have preliminary info in 48 hours. But Adrian, whatever you're planning, be smart about it. These rich bastards have lawyers that eat guys like us for breakfast. Let them try. The next morning brought the first piece of the puzzle. Hunter's text was short but devastating. Blake Morrison, married 12 years to Natalie Morrison. 2 kids. Wife has no idea about the affairs. This might be bigger than we thought. I stared at that message, feeling something cold settle in my chest. Blake wasn't just a cheating scumbag. He was a serial destroyer of families. How many other wives were getting played while their husbands got crushed in rigged court battles? That afternoon, I did something that would have horrified the old me. I broke into Violet's house. She was at work, and I knew her schedule better than she remembered. The spare key was still hidden under the fake rock by the front steps. Some habits die hard. Walking through the house where I'd built my dreams felt like visiting my own grave. But I wasn't there for nostalgia. I was there for answers. Violet's diary was in the same place it had been for 10 years. Inside her jewelry box, beneath the velvet lining. My hands shook as I opened it, and saw my worst fears confirmed in her own handwriting. March 15th. Blake says the plan is working perfectly. Judge Walsh has already agreed to rule in my favor. All I have to do is make Adrian look unstable. Blake promised me the house, Adrian's business assets, and full custody. He says once Adrian's destroyed, we can be together publicly. March 22nd. Had to coach Morgan today about what to say in court. She kept crying, asking why she had to lie about Daddy. Broke my heart, but Blake says it's the only way. He showed me photos of what happened to the last man who fought him in court, Julian West. Poor guy lost everything and ended up. I can't even write it. April 3rd. Blake is getting paranoid. Says Adrian might have recorded us that night. Made me search through Adrian's things for any evidence. Found his backup phone and deleted everything. Blake says if Adrian causes any more trouble, Morgan might have an accident at school. I'm starting to think I made a terrible mistake. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the diary. Violet hadn't just betrayed me. She'd been threatened into it. And Blake Morrison had done this before. Julian West. That name hit me like a sledgehammer. I pulled out my phone and searched Julian West custody battle. The results made my blood run cold. 2 years ago, Julian West lost custody of his twin daughters in a controversial case. 6 months later, he was found dead in his apartment, apparent suicide. The case had been heard by Judge Dominic Walsh. This wasn't about custody. This was about systematic destruction of fathers who stood in Blake Morrison's way. And if Violet's diary was right, I was next on his hit list. I photographed every page of her diary, then put everything back exactly as I'd found it. But as I was leaving, I heard voices at the front door. Violet was home early, and she wasn't alone. I don't like how Adrian looked at us in court. Blake's voice carried through the door. He's not broken yet. Some men just roll over and die. Others get dangerous. Blake, you promised me he wouldn't get hurt. Morgan needs her father, even if Morgan needs to forget her father exists. Just like the West twins forgot theirs. The key turned in the lock. I had seconds to get out. I slipped through the back door and crouched behind the garden shed as they entered the house. Through the window, I watched Blake grab Violet's arm, hard enough to leave bruises. Did you move anything in the bedroom? Something feels off. No, I haven't been upstairs all day. Blake, you're hurting me. Good. Because if Adrian gets any evidence on us, it won't just be you who pays the price. That little girl of yours might have an accident. Kids her age are so clumsy around swimming pools. The threat against Morgan hit me like physical violence. I had to bite my tongue to keep from storming inside and beating Blake Morrison to death with my bare hands. But getting arrested for assault wouldn't save my daughter. I needed to be smarter than that. As I crept away from the house, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. My blood froze when I saw the attachment. A photo of Morgan walking out of her school, taken just hours ago. The message was short, "Beautiful little girl. It would be a shame if something happened to her. Stop digging or find out what happened to Julian West." That's when I realized Blake Morrison hadn't just stolen my daughter through legal manipulation. He was holding her hostage with the threat of violence. Every day she spent with Violet was another day she was in danger from a sociopath who'd already killed to protect his secrets. But Blake made one crucial error. He thought threatening Morgan would make me back down. Instead, he just signed his own death warrant. Because the man who'd been fighting for custody was gone. In his place stood someone much more dangerous. A father with nothing left to lose and every reason to destroy the monster who'd stolen his child. The war was about to begin, and Blake Morrison had no idea what he'd unleashed. The funeral for Julian West had been a closed casket affair. I sat in the back row of the memorial service, watching his elderly mother weep over the son she'd lost to Blake Morrison's twisted game. But I wasn't there to pay respects. I was there to find allies. After the service, I approached a woman who'd been sobbing near the front pews. "Excuse me, were you close to Julian?" She looked up with red, swollen eyes. "I'm Natalie Morrison. Julian was like a brother to me after my husband destroyed his life." The irony of her name hit me like a freight train. This was Blake's wife, and she had no idea who I was. "Your husband destroyed Julian's life?" "Blake Morrison." She spat his name like poison. "He targeted Julian's business, turned his ex-wife against him, bought the judge. Julian tried to warn me about what kind of monster I married, but I didn't listen. I thought he was just bitter about losing custody of his girls." My heart pounded. "What do you mean he tried to warn you?" Natalie pulled out her phone and showed me a video message dated 3 days before Julian's death. His face was haggard, desperate, but his words were crystal clear. "Natalie, Blake isn't who you think he is. He's done this to 3 other fathers before me. He targets successful divorced men, seduces their ex-wives, bribes judges, then steals their assets and children. When they fight back, he destroys them completely. He showed me photos of what he did to Marcus Chun and Oliver Grant. I won't let him hurt my girls, but if something happens to me, you need to know the truth." Marcus Chun and Oliver Grant. I whispered. Both dead. Apparent suicides after losing custody battles. Natalie's voice broke. Blake has a pattern. He calls it asset acquisition through family destruction. He bragged about it once when he thought I was asleep. This was bigger than I'd imagined. Blake Morrison wasn't just a corrupt businessman. He was a serial killer who used the family court system as his weapon. And Judge Dominic Walsh was his executioner. Natalie, I need to tell you something. My name is Adrian Blackwood. Your husband just destroyed my family the same way he destroyed Julian's. Her face went white. You're the tech company owner. The custody case from last week. She grabbed my arm with desperate strength. Adrian, you have to get out of town. Now. Blake is planning something terrible for you. I heard him on the phone with someone. He said you were too smart to leave alive like the others. I can't leave. He has my daughter. Then we help each other. Her voice turned steel hard. I've been gathering evidence against Blake for months, ever since Julian tried to warn me. But I need someone with resources to make it count. That night, we met at an all-night diner on the outskirts of town. Natalie brought a briefcase full of documents that made my blood boil. Bank statements showing payments to Judge Walsh through a shell corporation. Photos of Blake with other corrupt officials. Audio recordings of him bragging about his collection of destroyed fathers. But the most damning evidence was a ledger in Blake's own handwriting, listing his victims like hunting trophies. Marcus Chun, Tech Executive, 2019. Asset value, $2.3 million. Status, eliminated. Oliver Grant, investment banker, 2020. Asset value, $1.8 million. Status, eliminated. Julian West, real estate developer, 2022. Asset value, $3.1 million. Status, eliminated. Adrian Blackwood, software company owner, 2024. Asset value, $4.2 million. Status, in progress. Eliminated. That's how Blake Morrison saw human beings. Problems to be eliminated after their assets were stripped away. There are others, Natalie whispered, pointing to incomplete entries. He's got 3 more targets lined up after you. Divorced fathers with successful businesses and children he can steal. I studied the ledger with growing horror and rage. How many judges is he paying? At least 5 in this district. Maybe more in surrounding counties. She pulled out another folder. Blake runs it like a business. He identifies wealthy, divorced men, has female associates seduce them during vulnerable periods, then manipulates the women into filing for divorce and custody. The judges rule in favor of the women. Blake acquires the men's assets through various legal mechanisms. Then the suicides eliminate any witnesses. The female associates, are they willing participants? Natalie's expression darkened. Some are. Others get blackmailed or threatened into compliance. Blake showed me photos once of what happens to women who try to back out. She shuddered. Your ex-wife, Violet. I think she's genuinely terrified of him. I've seen that look before. My phone buzzed with a text from Hunter. Emergency meeting. Now. Found something you need to see immediately. We met Hunter at his office at midnight. His face was grim as he spread crime scene photos across his desk. Adrian, I've been digging into those other suicide cases Natalie mentioned. Marcus Chun, Oliver Grant, Julian West, none of them killed themselves. These are professional hits made to look like suicides. He pointed to details in the photos. Marcus Chun allegedly hanged himself, but the ligature marks are wrong. Someone else tied that rope. Oliver Grant supposedly jumped from his balcony, but there are defensive wounds on his hands. Julian West was found with pills and alcohol, but the toxicology report shows he was unconscious when the drugs were administered. Blake Morrison is a serial killer, I said quietly. Worse, he's a serial killer with judicial immunity and police protection. Hunter pulled out another file. I've traced payments from Blake's shell companies to 12 different officials, judges, cops, prosecutors, even a few politicians. This corruption network spans 3 counties. Natalie leaned forward. How do we stop him? We don't just stop him, I said, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. We destroy his entire operation. Every judge he's bought, every official in his pocket, every associate who's helped him murder innocent fathers. Hunter nodded grimly. I've got contacts in the FBI who specialize in judicial corruption, but we need ironclad evidence and multiple witnesses willing to testify. You'll have both. I looked at Natalie. But first, we need to make sure Morgan is safe. Blake threatened her directly, which means he's getting desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. As we planned our next moves, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Violet's number, but when I answered, it was Morgan's terrified voice. Daddy? Daddy, please come get me. The bad man is yelling at Mommy again, and she's crying. I'm scared, Daddy. I'm hiding in my closet. The line went dead. Blake Morrison had just made his final mistake. He'd terrorized my daughter directly. Now the gloves were coming off. The police dispatcher's voice was ice-cold professional when I called 911. We need a wellness check at 847 Maple Grove Drive. A child called in distress. Line went dead. Sir, we'll need your name and relationship to the child's father. There's a history of domestic violence at this address. I hung up before they could ask more questions. Sometimes you have to game the system to save the people you love. I was already racing toward Violet's house when Hunter called. Adrian, where the hell are you going? We agreed to be smart about this. That was before he terrorized my 7-year-old daughter. Smart went out the window the second she called me crying. You storm in there now. You're playing right into his hands. He wants you to do something stupid so he can have you arrested or worse. Hunter was right, but logic didn't matter when your child was in danger. I parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, using the neighbor's hedges as cover. Through the living room window, I could see Blake pacing like a caged animal while Violet sat hunched on the couch, holding ice against her face. But it was what I heard that made my blood turn to lava. You stupid bitch, did you really think I wouldn't find out about your little diary confession? Blake's voice carried pure venom, writing down every detail of our operation like some teenage girl. Do you have any idea what you've done? Blake, please, Morgan might hear you. The sound of flesh hitting flesh echoed through the window. Violet's scream was cut short by another blow. Morgan is insurance, not family. The sooner you understand that, the better. And if Daddy Dearest keeps poking around where he doesn't belong, that insurance might need to be cashed in. That's when the police sirens filled the air. 3 patrol cars pulled up to the house, and I watched Blake's entire demeanor shift in seconds. The violent predator disappeared, replaced by a concerned businessman worried about his girlfriend's welfare. But I'd already circled to the back of the house. Morgan's bedroom window was on the ground floor, and I could see her small silhouette pressed against the glass. She spotted me immediately, and her face lit up with desperate hope. I tapped softly and mouthed, "Open the window." Her tiny fingers struggled with the latch, but she managed to push it up just as I heard Blake's voice at the front door, smooth as silk. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. My girlfriend fell down the stairs. She's very clumsy when she's been drinking." Morgan threw herself into my arms the second I climbed through the window. She was shaking like a leaf, and I could feel how much weight she'd lost in just the few days since the custody hearing. "Daddy, he hurt Mommy again. He said bad things about you. He said if you didn't stop being nosy, something terrible would happen to me. Nobody's going to hurt you, sweetheart. I promise." I held her tight, breathing in that familiar smell of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. "But I need you to be very brave for me. Can you do that?" She nodded against my chest. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Morgan, I want you to tell me exactly what the bad man said to you and Mommy. Don't be scared. Just tell me the truth." What came out of my daughter's mouth over the next 5 minutes was enough to destroy Blake Morrison 10 times over. She recounted threats against both her and me, described Blake hitting Violet multiple times, and most damning of all, she repeated conversations she'd overheard about, making daddies go away forever like the other men. Through the bedroom wall, I could hear Blake working his charm on the police officers. She's been under a lot of stress with the divorce proceedings. Sometimes she gets a little dramatic with the wine. You know how it is. But then I heard a female officer's voice cut through his performance. "Sir, we're going to need to speak with the child to ensure her welfare." Blake's response chilled me to the bone. The child is sleeping. It would be traumatic to wake her after witnessing her mother's accident. He was trying to prevent the police from talking to Morgan, the one witness who could expose everything. But he didn't know I was already there, recording every word of testimony that would destroy his entire operation. "Morgan, I need you to walk out to the living room and tell those police officers exactly what you just told me. Can you be brave enough to do that? Will they keep the bad man away from us?" "They will if you tell them the truth." I helped her climb back through the window, then watched from outside as my 7-year-old daughter walked into the living room and delivered the performance of her lifetime. The bad man hurt my mommy. He said he was going to make my daddy disappear like the other daddies who got too nosy. The temperature in that room dropped 20 degrees. I could see Blake's face through the window, the practiced charm cracking like a broken mask. "Officers, the child has an active imagination. She's been traumatized by the custody battle. Sir, we're going to need you to step outside while we interview the child and the mother separately." That's when Blake Morrison made his second critical mistake of the night. Instead of complying, he lunged toward Morgan with murder in his eyes. He never made it. Officer Paige Wilson tackled him to the ground before he could reach my daughter, and the sound of handcuffs clicking shut was the most beautiful music I'd ever heard. Through the window, I watched my brave little girl point at the bruises on Violet's face and calmly explain to the officers how the bad man had caused every mark. She talked about the other daddies who had disappeared after making Blake angry. She even led them to Violet's bedroom and showed them where the scary man kept pictures of hurt people. Within an hour, Blake Morrison was arrested on charges of domestic violence, child endangerment, and witness intimidation. But I knew this was just the beginning. A man with his resources and connections wouldn't stay in jail long unless we had overwhelming evidence of his larger crimes. As the police cars drove away with Blake in custody, I received a text from Natalie. "He's out on bail already." His lawyer posted $2 million like it was grocery money. "We have maybe 48 hours before he disappears or comes after all of us." But Blake Morrison had just handed us the key to his destruction. By threatening Morgan directly in front of witnesses and attacking her when police were present, he'd shown his true nature to people who mattered. The mask was off, and there was no putting it back on. More importantly, Morgan was safe for the moment, and I had her testimony on video. Testimony that would connect Blake to a pattern of threatening children and eliminating their fathers. The war had escalated, but for the first time since this nightmare began, we had Blake Morrison on the defensive. And a cornered animal always makes the most mistakes. Blake Morrison's bail hearing lasted exactly 14 minutes. His attorney, a sharp-dressed predator named Quentin Hayes, painted him as a pillar of the community who'd been victimized by a vindictive ex-husband's manipulation. Judge Evan Carlisle, who wasn't on Blake's payroll, yet set bail at $2 million without blinking. Blake walked out of lockup 18 hours after his arrest like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. The mask was off, and now the real game could begin. I spent that night in a hotel room with Morgan and Violet, who'd finally broken completely after seeing Blake arrested. She sat in the corner, rocking back and forth, whispering about what he'll do to us now that he knows we talked. "Violet," I said gently, "I need you to focus. Blake's operation is bigger than just corrupt judges. How many other people are involved? You don't understand." Her voice was barely audible. "Blake doesn't just buy officials, he owns them. Judge Walsh. Blake has photos of him with underage girls at private parties. Detective Logan Pierce. Blake paid off his gambling debts and now owns him completely. City Prosecutor Victor Kane. Blake helped cover up a hit-and-run that would have destroyed his career. The scope of corruption was staggering. Blake hadn't just bribed people. He'd systematically compromised them through blackmail, making them willing participants in his criminal enterprise. There's more, Violet continued. Blake has files on everyone. Politicians, business leaders, even FBI agents. He calls it his insurance policy. If anyone tries to bring him down, he threatens to release everything and destroy half the power structure in this city. But Blake Morrison had made one critical error in his psychological profile of me. He thought I was like his other victims, successful men with reputations to protect, people who could be intimidated by threats of scandal or financial ruin. He didn't understand that when someone steals your child, you stop caring about everything else. Hunter arrived at dawn with a briefcase full of surveillance equipment and a plan that would have made our old Army unit proud. We're going to make Blake Morrison paranoid, he announced, spreading photos across the hotel room table. These are pictures of his security detail, his daily routine, his business meetings. Starting today, he's going to see us everywhere. The psychological campaign began immediately. Hunter's team planted surveillance devices in Blake's office building, not to record conversations, but to let him find them. We wanted him to know he was being watched. Natalie used her access to Blake's home computer to plant fake emails suggesting FBI investigation, then deleted them so Blake would find traces in his cache files. Within 48 hours, Blake was jumping at shadows. His security team reported multiple false alarms, suspicious vehicles that turned out to be empty, phone calls that dropped immediately when answered, anonymous packages containing nothing but photographs of his daily activities. But our masterstroke came when Blake met with Judge Walsh at their usual restaurant. We didn't record their conversation. We didn't need to. Instead, we had Natalie call the FBI tip line from a burner phone and report 2 men at Giovanni's restaurant discussing cash payments for favorable court rulings. The FBI didn't follow up immediately, but they logged the call, and Blake's security team intercepted police communications about the report within hours. Blake Morrison, the master manipulator who destroyed dozens of families, was now convinced federal agents were closing in on him. His paranoia made him sloppy, and sloppy criminals make mistakes that destroy them. The first mistake came when Blake tried to eliminate loose ends. He ordered his associate Ruby Chun, Marcus Chin's widow, who'd been coerced into helping lure other victims, to leave town immediately with a briefcase full of cash. But Ruby had been waiting 3 years for revenge against the man who'd murdered her husband and stolen her children. Instead of running, she walked straight into the FBI field office with every document Blake had ever given her, including detailed instructions for seducing divorced fathers and manipulating custody proceedings. Blake's second mistake was trying to intimidate Judge Walsh into covering their tracks. But Walsh was already panicking about the FBI tip, and when Blake demanded he handle the Adrian Blackwood problem permanently, the judge made his own desperate choice. He started recording their conversations. Within a week, we had audio evidence of Blake ordering a hit on me, bribing multiple judges, and threatening to release compromising photos of public officials who didn't cooperate with his schemes. But Blake's final mistake was underestimating a 7-year-old girl's courage. Morgan had been staying with me during the protective custody period following Blake's arrest. One afternoon, while I was meeting with Hunter and Natalie to plan our next move, Blake Morrison showed up at my hotel. He didn't come to threaten me. He came to take my daughter. Morgan was in the hotel pool with a security guard I'd hired when Blake walked through the gates wearing a fake maintenance uniform. He told her that Mommy was hurt and needed to see her right away. Any other child might have gone with him. But Morgan had learned to be suspicious of men who lied to her. Instead of following Blake, she asked him a question that destroyed his entire psychological advantage. If Mommy's hurt, why isn't Daddy with you? Blake's response revealed the psychopath beneath the charm. Your daddy isn't coming, sweetie. Daddy had an accident, just like all the other daddies who made me angry. Morgan smiled at him with the innocence of childhood and said, "That's okay. I recorded everything you just said." She held up the phone I'd given her for emergencies. a phone that had been recording since the moment Blake approached her. His confession to murdering other daddies was captured in perfect digital clarity, along with his implied threat against my life. Blake realized what had happened and lunged for the phone, but hotel security was already moving. Hunter had been watching through surveillance cameras, and our backup plan went into effect immediately. Blake Morrison, master manipulator and serial killer, was tackled by 3 security guards while trying to steal a phone from a 7-year-old girl. The optics were devastating, and every second was recorded by hotel cameras. But the real victory wasn't Blake's arrest. It was seeing Morgan stand up to her tormentor without fear. She'd stopped being a victim and become a warrior, just like her father. As police led Blake away in handcuffs for the second time in a week, he looked back at me with pure hatred. But I wasn't the same broken man he'd destroyed in family court. I was someone much more dangerous, a father with evidence, allies, and absolutely nothing left to lose. The psychological warfare phase was over. Now came the complete destruction of Blake Morrison and everyone who'd helped him steal children from their fathers. Blake Morrison's second arrest lasted exactly 36 hours. His lawyers, a team of 5 specialists in federal defense, worked around the clock to minimize the charges. Attempted kidnapping became misunderstanding with a minor. Death threats became emotional outbursts under stress. The hotel surveillance footage mysteriously developed technical glitches that made facial identification inconclusive. But Blake had no idea his real problems were just beginning. FBI agent Tristan Cole arrived at my hotel room the morning after Blake's release, carrying a briefcase that would change everything. Cole was young, ambitious, and hungry for a career-making case. More importantly, he'd been investigating judicial corruption for 2 years and was looking for someone with inside knowledge. Mr. Blackwood, we've received some interesting anonymous tips about irregularities in family court proceedings, he said, settling into the chair across from me. Multiple sources suggest Judge Dominic Walsh has been accepting payments for favorable rulings. Would you know anything about that? I slid Natalie's evidence folder across the table. Agent Cole, what if I told you Blake Morrison has been systematically murdering divorced fathers for their assets, using the family court system as his weapon? Cole's expression shifted from professional interest to deadly focus as he examined the documents. Bank records showing payments to Judge Walsh. Photos of Blake with other corrupt officials. Most damning of all, Blake's handwritten ledger listing his victims like hunting trophies. How did you obtain these materials? Blake Morrison's wife provided them. She's been gathering evidence against him for months, waiting for someone with the authority to act on it. Cole studied the ledger with growing amazement. Marcus Chun, Oliver Grant, Julian West. We looked into these cases when their families complained about suspicious circumstances, but without evidence of foul play. Now you have evidence. Blake Morrison doesn't just steal assets through corrupt court rulings. He eliminates witnesses who might expose his operation. But our breakthrough was interrupted by my phone buzzing with an emergency call from hotel security. Mr. Blackwood, you need to get to the parking garage immediately. There's been an incident. We found Violet's car engulfed in flames, the explosion having occurred just minutes after she dropped Morgan off at the hotel. The bomb had been crude but effective, designed to kill the driver while making it look like a car accident. If Violet hadn't stopped to tie Morgan's shoelace before getting back in the car, she'd be dead. Agent Cole examined the scene with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen similar attacks. This wasn't random. Someone wanted to eliminate a witness. Within hours, Blake Morrison was back in handcuffs, this time facing federal charges of attempted murder, witness intimidation, and racketeering. But his arrest triggered something none of us had anticipated. A citywide cleanup operation as corrupt officials scrambled to cover their tracks. Judge Walsh attempted to flee the country but was arrested at the airport with a suitcase full of cash and documents proving his involvement in Blake's operation. Detective Pierce turned himself in, hoping cooperation would reduce his sentence. Prosecutor Kane tried to destroy evidence, but was caught by federal agents who'd been monitoring his activities. But Blake Morrison's reach extended further than any of us had imagined. That evening, while I was reviewing case files with Agent Cole, Morgan came running from the hotel pool area with tears streaming down her face. "Daddy," the nice lady at the pool said she had a message from Mommy. But when I got close, she tried to grab me. I screamed and ran away. Hotel security found the woman, Ruby Chun, Marcus Chin's widow, who'd been coerced into helping Blake lure victims. But instead of attempting another kidnapping, she'd come to warn us. "Blake's associates are planning something terrible," she sobbed as security held her. "They know the FBI is closing in, so they're going to eliminate everyone who can testify against them. You, your daughter, Natalie, Judge Walsh, everyone. Tonight." Agent Cole immediately called for federal protection, but we were too late. By the time agents reached Judge Walsh's house, it was already on fire. Walsh had been shot execution style before the building was torched. Natalie Morrison was found unconscious in her garage, carbon monoxide poisoning staged to look like suicide. Blake Morrison was orchestrating the elimination of his entire network from federal lockup, using associates we hadn't identified to tie up loose ends. But Blake had made one final miscalculation. He assumed terrorizing my family would make me retreat into protective custody, leaving him free to destroy the remaining evidence. Instead, it made me realize that playing defense would get us all killed. "Agent Cole, Blake Morrison has been running this operation for at least 5 years. How many other cities might he have networks in?" Cole pulled up FBI databases on his laptop. "Based on the evidence you've provided, we're looking at similar patterns in Houston, Phoenix, and Miami. Corrupt judges, suspicious custody cases, and unexplained deaths of divorced fathers." That's when I understood the true scope of Blake Morrison's empire. This wasn't just about one corrupt businessman in one city. Blake had built a nationwide operation, systematically destroying families and murdering fathers across multiple states. But his greatest strength, the network of corrupt officials protecting him, was about to become his greatest weakness. Because when federal authorities start arresting judges and prosecutors, even the most corrupt officials begin considering cooperation to save themselves. And Blake Morrison, sitting in federal lockup while his empire crumbled around him, was about to learn that destroying families had made him more enemies than any man could survive. The real war was just beginning, and this time, I had the federal government as my army. The federal safe house looked like any other suburban home from the outside, but inside it was a fortress. Bulletproof windows, reinforced doors, and enough surveillance equipment to monitor a small city. Agent Cole had moved us there after Natalie Morrison barely survived the carbon monoxide attack that killed Judge Walsh. "We've identified at least 12 associates in Blake Morrison's network," Cole explained, spreading photos across the kitchen table while Morgan colored quietly in the corner. Ruby Chun was just the beginning. Blake's been recruiting desperate people for years. Widows, ex-cons, people with nothing to lose who'll do anything for money. But Blake Morrison's reach extended beyond hired killers. Within hours of our relocation, my business partner Felix called with devastating news. "Adrian, someone's been calling our clients, claiming you're under federal investigation for money laundering. 3 major contracts got canceled this morning. Your company's hemorrhaging money." Blake was destroying my livelihood from federal lockup, using associates to spread rumors that would bankrupt me even if I survived his assassination attempts. But financial ruin was the least of my concerns when Violet rushed into the safe house with blood on her clothes and terror in her eyes. "They came to my apartment," she gasped, collapsing into a chair. 3 men with guns, asking where Morgan was staying. I told them I didn't know, so they... She pulled up her shirt, revealing cigarette burns on her ribs. "They tortured me for 2 hours before I managed to escape." Agent Cole immediately called for additional security, but we all knew the truth. Blake Morrison's associates weren't going to stop until everyone who could testify against him was dead. That's when my phone rang with a call that changed everything. "Daddy." The voice was small, terrified, and definitely not Morgan. I looked across the room where my daughter was still coloring, then realized someone else's child was on the line. "This is Adrian Blackwood." "Who is this?" "My name is Clara West. I'm Julian West's daughter. The bad man has my sister Ruby, and he says he'll hurt her if you don't come trade yourself for her." My blood turned to ice. Blake Morrison had kidnapped Julian West's surviving child to force me into the open. Through the phone, I could hear a little girl crying in the background. "Clara, where are you calling from?" "I don't know. A big house with lots of cars. The bad man says you have 1 hour to come alone, or my sister will disappear forever like Daddy did." Agent Cole was already tracing the call, but Blake's people were smarter than that. The call came from a burner phone, and background noise suggested an industrial area with multiple possible locations. "Adrian, this is obviously a trap," Cole warned. "Blake knows we won't let you go alone, so he's counting on us bringing a federal team he can ambush." But Blake Morrison had miscalculated again. He thought threatening innocent children would force me to make desperate choices. Instead, it reminded me that this was bigger than my personal revenge. Dozens of families had been destroyed by his operation, and more would die if he wasn't stopped permanently. "Agent Cole, how many federal agents do you have available for a tactical operation? We can have a full hostage rescue team mobilized within 2 hours." But without knowing the exact location, I know the location. Natalie spoke from the corner where she'd been examining Blake's personal papers. Blake owns a warehouse complex on Industrial Boulevard through one of his shell companies. He calls it his problem-solving facility. That's where he took other victims when they needed to disappear. The warehouse complex was a maze of connected buildings surrounded by 8-foot fences and security cameras. But Blake's arrogance worked against him. He'd chosen a location where federal agents could position snipers and surveillance teams without being detected. As we planned the rescue operation, Morgan tugged at my sleeve with that serious expression she got when something was bothering her. "Daddy, the bad man hurt other kids like Clara and Ruby?" "Yes, sweetheart. But we're going to make sure he never hurts anyone again." "Good. Because hurting kids is the worst thing anyone can do." Her simple moral clarity reminded me why this fight mattered. Blake Morrison didn't just destroy marriages or steal money. He traumatized children and murdered their fathers. The children he orphaned would carry those scars forever. Agent Cole's tactical team moved into position at sunset. Thermal imaging showed at least 6 people inside the main warehouse, Blake's associates guarding the West children and probably setting up an ambush for my arrival. But Blake Morrison had made his final strategic error. He assumed I'd come alone and unprepared, making me an easy target for elimination. Instead, I was arriving with a federal hostage rescue team trained to end situations like this with extreme prejudice. The assault began at exactly 8 p.m. with flashbang grenades and coordinated entry through multiple access points. Blake's associates never had a chance to harm the children or execute their ambush plan. Within minutes, both West children were safe, and 3 of Blake's gunmen were in custody. But the warehouse held more than kidnapped children. Agent Cole's team found a room full of evidence documenting Blake's entire criminal enterprise. Files on every victim, photos of every corrupt official, and most damning of all, video recordings of Blake personally executing Marcus Chun and Oliver Grant. These suicides were revealed as brutal murders, captured in high definition by Blake's own security cameras. But the greatest victory wasn't the evidence we'd seized. It was seeing Clara and Ruby West reunited with their grandmother, the only family they had left after Blake Morrison murdered their father. As federal agents processed the crime scene, I received a call from the detention center where Blake was being held. He wanted to speak with me directly, claiming he had information that could save my daughter's life. Blake Morrison, master manipulator and serial killer, was about to make his final play. But this time, I held all the cards, and his game was over. The federal detention center interview room smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Blake Morrison sat across from me in an orange jumpsuit, his hands shackled to the metal table, but his eyes still held that predatory confidence that had destroyed so many families. Adrian Blackwood. His voice carried the same smooth charm that had seduced Violet and corrupted judges. You look terrible. Prison food not agreeing with you. I wasn't in prison. I was there as a federal witness under Agent Cole's protection. But Blake was playing psychological games even from behind bars, trying to maintain control through manipulation. You wanted to talk. Talk. Blake leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Your daughter Morgan is a beautiful child. Smart, brave, trusting. It would be tragic if something happened to her while I'm locked up in here. The threat was clear, but Blake had miscalculated. I'd spent weeks documenting his operation, and I knew his network was crumbling. Most of his associates were dead or in custody, and the survivors were cooperating with federal authorities to reduce their sentences. Your operation is finished, Blake. Judge Walsh is dead. Your gunmen are arrested, and Ruby Chun is testifying against you in exchange for immunity. Blake's confident mask slipped for just a moment. You think you've won? Adrian, I've been building this network for 8 years. I have associates you haven't discovered, judges you haven't identified, officials in positions you can't imagine. But his desperation was showing. Blake Morrison, who'd once controlled an empire of corruption spanning multiple states, was reduced to making empty threats from a federal holding cell. There's something you don't understand about men like me, he continued. We don't build operations that depend on our personal freedom. I've got dead man switches in place. Evidence that will destroy dozens of innocent families if anything happens to me. Agent Cole, monitoring from behind one-way glass, had warned me about this tactic. Blake was claiming to have compromising information on his victims' families, threatening to release it unless his demands were met. It was a bluff. Desperate killers always claimed to have insurance policies they didn't possess. Show me. Blake smiled, thinking he'd regained control. I have videos of Judge Walsh with underage prostitutes. Photos of Prosecutor Kane taking bribes from drug dealers. Financial records proving Senator Grant embezzled campaign funds. If I don't make a phone call every 72 hours, everything gets released to every media outlet in the country. The lies came easily to him, but I'd seen Blake's actual evidence cache when federal agents raided his warehouse. His insurance policy was limited to the corrupt officials who'd helped him, people whose destruction would actually benefit society. Blake, you're forgetting something important. I don't care about corrupt officials getting exposed. In fact, I prefer it. His expression shifted from confidence to confusion. Blake Morrison had spent years terrorizing people who had reputations to protect, assets to lose, social standing to maintain. He'd never dealt with someone who'd already lost everything that mattered except his daughter. You're bluffing. Everyone has something to hide, something they're afraid of losing. I lost everything when you stole my daughter. My marriage, my trust in the justice system, my faith in people. You can't threaten me with exposure because I have nothing left to hide. That's when Blake Morrison made his final mistake. Realizing threats wouldn't work, he tried to negotiate. What if I told you where Marcus Chin's missing assets are hidden? $2.3 million that could be returned to his widow and children. What if I provided evidence against the other corrupt judges in my network? Judges who are still destroying families right now. The offer was tempting, but accepting it would mean legitimizing Blake's belief that everything was transactional, that justice could be bought and sold like any other commodity. Blake, I'm not here to make deals with you. I'm here to watch you realize that your empire is gone, your associates are dead or cooperating, and you're going to spend the rest of your life in federal prison. For the first time since I'd known him, Blake Morrison looked genuinely afraid. The master manipulator who'd controlled judges and politicians was facing the one thing he couldn't buy, threaten, or manipulate: absolute justice. You destroyed my family for money, I continued, but you made one crucial error. You thought I was like your other victims, someone who would break under pressure and disappear quietly. Instead, you created someone with nothing to lose and every reason to see you destroyed. Blake's facade finally cracked completely. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're better than me? I gave those fathers what they deserved. Weak men who couldn't protect their families from superior competition. The mask was off now. Blake Morrison revealed himself as the sociopathic predator he'd always been, someone who viewed destroying families as a competitive sport. Marcus Chun was weak. Oliver Grant was weak. Julian West was weak. They were good fathers who loved their children. You murdered them because they stood between you and their assets. I eliminated obstacles to progress. Blake snarled. Those men were holding back resources that could be put to better use. Their children are better off without weak fathers who couldn't protect them. Agent Cole entered the room, having heard enough. Mr. Morrison, you've just confessed to multiple murders in front of federal witnesses. This interview is over. As guards led Blake away, he made one final threat. This isn't finished, Adrian. I have people on the outside who will make sure you pay for destroying me. But Blake Morrison's words carried no weight anymore. His network was dismantled, his associates were captured or killed, and his reign of terror was over. The man who'd systematically destroyed families for profit was finally facing justice. More importantly, his confession had been recorded, providing federal prosecutors with everything they needed to ensure he'd never threaten another family again. The monster who stole my daughter had just sealed his own fate. Blake Morrison's federal trial began 3 months after his confession in the detention center interview room. The courthouse was packed with media, families of his victims, and federal agents who'd worked the case. I sat in the front row, watching the man who destroyed my family face justice at last. Prosecutor Amelia Kane, no relation to the corrupt prosecutor Blake had compromised, presented a case that was overwhelming in its scope and devastating in its detail. Videos of Blake personally executing Marcus Chun and Oliver Grant. Audio recordings of him ordering Judge Walsh to rule against me. Bank records showing millions in stolen assets from his victims' families. But the most powerful testimony came from the children Blake had orphaned. Clara West, now 12 years old, took the stand with remarkable composure. The bad man killed my daddy because daddy wouldn't let him steal our house. He made my sister and me hide while he hurt daddy. Then he made everyone think daddy killed himself. Blake's defense attorney, Quentin Hayes, tried to discredit the children's testimony by claiming they'd been coached. But Agent Cole had hours of video evidence showing Blake's associates threatening the West children and other victims' families. Ruby Chun, Marcus Chin's widow, provided testimony that demolished Blake's financial empire. She'd kept detailed records of every transaction, every bribe, every asset transfer Blake had forced her to facilitate after her husband's murder. He told me if I didn't help him steal from other families, he'd kill my children too, she testified. I've been gathering evidence against him for 3 years, waiting for someone brave enough to stop him. Natalie Morrison's testimony revealed the personal cost of Blake's operations. My husband destroyed dozens of families for money, but he also destroyed our marriage and traumatized our children. Living with a monster taught me what evil really looks like. But Blake Morrison wasn't going down without a fight. When called to testify in his own defense, he attempted to portray himself as a successful businessman who'd been framed by jealous competitors and vindictive ex-wives. Adrian Blackwood is a failed husband who couldn't keep his wife happy, Blake claimed from the witness stand. Instead of accepting responsibility for his marriage's failure, he's created an elaborate conspiracy theory to avoid facing his own inadequacies. The jury wasn't buying it. They'd seen too much evidence, heard too many consistent testimonies, and watched Blake's own recorded confessions. His charm and manipulation tactics meant nothing when confronted with overwhelming proof of systematic murder and corruption. Federal Judge Ophelia Grant, appointed specifically because she had no connections to Blake's network, delivered the verdict after 3 days of deliberation. Blake Morrison, you have been found guilty on all counts. 14 counts of first-degree murder, 12 counts of judicial bribery, 8 counts of racketeering, 6 counts of kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit federal crimes across 4 states. The courtroom erupted in cheers from victims' families. I felt tears streaming down my face as Judge Grant continued. This court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, to be served in ADX Florence Supermax facility. Additionally, all assets connected to your criminal enterprise are forfeited to compensate victims' families. Blake Morrison, the man who'd systematically destroyed families for profit, would spend the rest of his life in a concrete cell with no human contact. But his punishment wasn't enough to undo the damage he'd caused. That evening, Agent Cole met me at the hotel where Morgan and I were staying under federal protection. Adrian, there's something you need to know. Blake's network extended further than we initially realized. He spread files across the table showing corruption investigations in 6 other states. We've identified similar operations in Houston, Phoenix, Miami, Detroit, and Seattle. Corrupt judges, murdered fathers, stolen assets. The same pattern Blake perfected here. The scope was staggering. Blake Morrison hadn't just been a local criminal. He'd been the architect of a nationwide conspiracy to destroy families and murder fathers who fought back. How many more victims? At least 47 murdered fathers across 6 states. Maybe more. Blake was franchising his operation, teaching other criminals how to use family courts as weapons. But there was good news. Blake's conviction had triggered federal investigations in every jurisdiction where his associates operated. The entire network was crumbling as prosecutors used his testimony and evidence to build cases against corrupt officials nationwide. More importantly, the families he destroyed were finally getting justice. Marcus Chin's widow received $2.3 million in recovered assets. Julian West's daughters were reunited with their grandmother, who also received their father's stolen business assets. Oliver Grant's family got their house back after it had been sold to one of Blake's shell companies. 6 months after Blake's conviction, I received a call that changed everything. Judge Eliza Thompson, the honest family court judge appointed to review all of Blake's corrupted cases, had made her decision. Mr. Blackwood, after reviewing the evidence of judicial corruption in your custody case, this court hereby reverses all previous rulings. Full custody of Morgan Blackwood is awarded to her father, with supervised visitation rights granted to the mother upon completion of court-mandated therapy. The legal nightmare was finally over. Morgan and I could go home. But Blake Morrison's legacy of destruction had taught me something important. There were other fathers out there fighting corrupt systems, losing their children to criminals who used family courts as weapons. The war against judicial corruption was bigger than my personal case. That's why I used the compensation money from Blake's forfeited assets to establish the Julian West Foundation for Judicial Integrity, providing legal assistance to fathers fighting corruption in family courts nationwide. Blake Morrison had created a monster when he stole my daughter. But that monster was dedicated to protecting other families from predators who used children as weapons. 1 year after Blake Morrison's sentencing to ADX Florence Supermax prison, Morgan and I sat in our backyard watching her build a treehouse with Hunter's help. The Federal Witness Protection Program had ended 6 months ago, but some habits remained. Hunter still visited weekly, claiming he needed to check our security, though we all knew he'd become family. Life looked normal from the outside. Morgan attended Jefferson Elementary, where her teacher praised her resilience and academic progress. I'd rebuilt my tech company with contracts from 3 federal agencies, impressed by my work exposing corruption. We lived in a modest house with a big yard where Morgan could play safely. But healing wasn't that simple. Morgan still had nightmares about the bad man. and I struggled with hypervigilance that made simple tasks like grocery shopping feel dangerous. We both attended therapy sessions with Dr. Paige Chun, a trauma specialist who understood what families torn apart by violence needed to rebuild. "Daddy, why does Mommy cry every time she sees me?" Morgan asked during one of our Saturday morning pancake breakfasts. Violet had been attending supervised visitation sessions for 8 months, slowly earning back the right to spend time with her daughter. "Mommy made some bad choices that hurt our family. She's very sorry and wants to be a better person. Is she still scared of the bad man?" Blake Morrison would spend the rest of his life in a concrete cell, but his psychological impact lingered. Violet suffered from severe PTSD and panic attacks triggered by memories of Blake's violence. Her recovery was slow but genuine. She'd moved to a small apartment, worked at a nonprofit helping domestic violence survivors, and attended therapy 3 times a week. "The bad man can't hurt anyone anymore, sweetheart. He's locked up forever in a special prison where he can never escape." But Blake Morrison's network had extended beyond our city. Agent Cole visited monthly with updates on federal investigations across 6 states. 47 families had received justice as Blake's associates were convicted and corrupt officials were removed from office. The Julian West Foundation had grown beyond what I'd imagined possible. Using the $4.2 million recovered from Blake's assets, we'd hired 12 attorneys specializing in judicial corruption cases. In our first year, we'd helped 36 fathers regain custody of children stolen through rigged court proceedings. Ruby Chun, Marcus Chin's widow, had become the foundation's director of family services. Her experience surviving Blake's manipulation made her uniquely qualified to help other families navigate the complex trauma of judicial corruption. "Adrian, we've got 3 new cases this month," she reported during our quarterly board meeting. A father in Miami whose judge was taking bribes from his ex-wife's boyfriend. A dad in Seattle who lost custody after his ex planted drugs in his car. And a case in Houston that looks exactly like Blake's operation. Corrupt judge, manipulated ex-wife, suspicious business deals. Each case reminded me how many families were still fighting battles we'd already won. Blake Morrison had been one criminal in a system that enabled predators to use children as weapons. Our foundation was addressing the symptoms, but the disease of corruption ran deeper than any single organization could cure. That's why I accepted the phone call that would change everything. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Senator Ivy Martinez from the Senate Judiciary Committee. We're conducting hearings on family court corruption, and we'd like you to testify about your experiences." The opportunity to address systemic problems at the federal level was everything the foundation had been working toward. But testifying meant reliving the nightmare publicly, exposing Morgan to media attention, and potentially making us targets for other corrupt officials. "Senator, what specific reforms are you proposing?" "Mandatory recording of all family court proceedings. Financial disclosure requirements for judges. Federal oversight of custody cases involving allegations of corruption. And criminal penalties for officials who accept bribes in family court matters." The reforms would prevent future Blake Morrisons from destroying families with impunity. But they required congressional action, which meant political battles that could take years to resolve. That evening, I discussed the invitation with Morgan over dinner. Despite her young age, she deserved input on decisions that would affect her life. "Daddy, if you tell the important people about the bad man, will it help other kids like Claire and Ruby?" Her simple question captured the moral complexity perfectly. Speaking out could help other children avoid the trauma she'd experienced, but it would also keep her connected to painful memories she was working to overcome. It might help other kids, but it would mean lots of people asking questions about what happened to us. Morgan considered this with the seriousness of someone who'd been forced to grow up too quickly. "Will the bad man find out if you tell the senator people?" Blake Morrison would never leave ADX Florence, but his associates might still pose threats. Federal authorities had arrested most of his network, but some accomplices remained unidentified. The bad man will never hurt us again. But there might be other bad people who get angry if we tell the truth about what happened. Daddy, you always taught me that telling the truth is the right thing to do, even when it's scary. My 7-year-old daughter had just made the moral case for congressional testimony better than any lawyer could. We'd survived Blake Morrison's attempts to destroy our family. Now we had an obligation to help other families avoid the same nightmare. The healing process would continue, but it would happen alongside our fight for justice. Because sometimes the best way to process trauma is to ensure others never experience it. 2 years after Blake Morrison's conviction, I stood before the Senate Judiciary Committee in the Hart Senate Office Building, preparing to give testimony that could change family court systems nationwide. Senator Ivy Martinez had assembled the most comprehensive hearing on judicial corruption in family courts in congressional history. Mr. Blackwood, thank you for your courage in coming forward, Senator Martinez began. Your case exposed systematic corruption that destroyed dozens of families across multiple states. What reforms would you recommend to prevent future Blake Morrisons? I looked at the packed hearing room. Families who'd survived similar corruption, lawyers fighting rigged systems, and journalists documenting the crisis. Morgan sat in the front row with Hunter and Violet, all three wearing matching blue ribbons supporting judicial reform. Senator, Blake Morrison succeeded because family courts operate in shadows. No recordings, no oversight, no accountability when judges make decisions that destroy children's lives. We need mandatory recording of all proceedings, financial disclosure requirements for judges, and federal oversight of custody cases involving corruption allegations. The next 6 hours of testimony revealed the scope of corruption we'd uncovered. Ruby Chin described how Blake's network operated across state lines. Agent Cole presented evidence of 47 murdered fathers and hundreds of corrupted cases. Most powerfully, Clara West, now 14, testified about losing her father to a system designed to protect families. My daddy fought for us until the day he died, Clara said with remarkable composure. The judge and the bad man killed him because he wouldn't let them steal our family. No other kid should lose their daddy the way my sister and I did. The hearing concluded with Senator Martinez announcing the Family Court Integrity Act, legislation requiring transparency, accountability, and federal oversight of custody proceedings. It wasn't perfect, but it would prevent future predators from using children as weapons. 3 months later, the bill passed both houses of Congress with bipartisan support. President Thompson signed it into law in a Rose Garden ceremony attended by families Blake Morrison had destroyed. Standing with the president as he signed legislation protecting children felt like completing a journey that began with losing Morgan in Judge Walsh's courtroom. But the real victory happened that evening at Morgan's school play. She was performing in The Wizard of Oz, playing Dorothy with confidence and joy that would have been impossible during Blake's reign of terror. Watching her sing Over the Rainbow with pure happiness reminded me why the fight had been worth everything. After the play, we walked to our car through the school parking lot, where Blake Morrison had once threatened to make me disappear like the other daddies. That same space now held families celebrating their children's performances, parents who didn't have to fear corrupt judges or criminal predators stealing their kids. Daddy, do you think the bad man is watching the stars from his prison cell? Morgan asked as we drove home. I don't know, sweetheart, but I know he can't hurt any more families. Good. Because families should stay together when they love each other. Her simple wisdom captured everything we'd fought for. Blake Morrison had tried to teach us that love could be bought, that justice was for sale, that children were just assets to be stolen. Instead, he'd learned that some bonds can't be broken, some fights are worth everything, and some enemies create the very forces that destroy them. 6 months later, the Julian West Foundation had helped 93 fathers regain custody of children stolen through corrupt proceedings. The Family Court Integrity Act had triggered investigations in 12 states. removing 37 corrupt judges and prosecutors. Blake Morrison's network was completely dismantled, and his surviving associates were serving federal prison sentences. More importantly, families were healing. Ruby Chun had remarried a good man who adopted her children. Clara and Ruby West were thriving with their grandmother, both excelling in school and showing no lasting trauma from their ordeal. Violet had completed her therapy program and was building a healthy relationship with Morgan based on honesty instead of manipulation. As I tucked Morgan into bed that night, she asked the question that had been haunting both of us. "Daddy, what if the bad man had won? What if we never saw each other again?" But we did see each other again. And we always will, because nothing in this world is stronger than a parent's love for their child. Not even bad judges or scary men with guns. Not even them. Love always wins in the end, even when it takes time to get there. Blake Morrison had stolen 2 years of our lives, murdered innocent fathers, and traumatized dozens of children. But his evil had created something he never anticipated, a nationwide movement to protect families from predators who used children as weapons. The monster who tried to destroy us had instead made us stronger than ever. My dear friends, after hearing this incredible journey of justice and revenge, I have to ask you something that's been on my heart. How does it feel to witness a father's love triumph over the darkest corruption? Doesn't this story remind us that no matter how powerful evil seems, it can never defeat the pure love between a parent and child? Please share with me in the comments below. Where are you watching from? I love connecting with viewers from around the world. And don't forget to hit that like button if this story moved you. And subscribe for more incredible tales of betrayal, justice, and ultimate redemption. Most importantly, tell me in the comments what types of stories you want to hear next. Do you prefer military revenge stories, family betrayal tales, or perhaps stories about ordinary people fighting extraordinary corruption? Your feedback helps me bring you exactly the kind of content that keeps you on the edge of your seat. Until we meet again in the next thrilling story of epic revenge and justice, take care of yourselves, and remember, love and truth always prevail in the end. Story is finished.